The year was 1899, and Australia was slowly emerging from the shadows of the economic depression that had gripped the country in the early 1890s. Confidence was cautiously returning, and towns across the nation were beginning to rebuild. Farmers tended their fields with renewed hope. Small industries buzzed with quiet activity, and the railway lines stitched the countryside to the growing cities, carrying goods, people, and optimism. In the rural town of Broadford, nestled along the winding Sunday Creek, life moved at a gentle, unhurried pace. The town served the surrounding farms, sawmills, and the small paper mill that produced strawboard. Cobbled streets and modest timber homes lined the quiet roads. The scent of smoke from chimneys mingled with the earthy aroma of fields, while children played near the creek, their laughter echoing softly through the crisp summer air. Broadford was a place where neighbors knew each other by name, where daily life was simple, and where every small event, a market, a church gathering, or a holiday celebration, became the heartbeat of the community. It was here, in this calm and unassuming town, that the story of Olivia Rita Jones, a bright and cheerful 8-year-old girl, would soon unfold, leaving a mark on Broadford that no one could forget. In the heart of Broadford lived a little girl named Olivia Rita Jones, though everyone simply called her Rita. She was 8 years old, full of life and curiosity, her laughter like a melody weaving through the quiet streets of the town. Her dark eyes sparkled with intelligence and mischief, and her smile could brighten even the dullest winter morning. Rita lived with her grandparents, Mr. Alfred and Mrs. Elizabeth Temple, who had lovingly cared for her for several years. Her parents, residing in Wong, New South Wales, were busy with her father's work as a mining manager, so sending Rita to Broadford had given her the opportunity to attend school with ease. She had grown attached to the gentle rhythm of life here, the routines of school, and the familiar faces of neighbors and friends. Every day, Rita's small footsteps echoed along the cobblestone streets as she ran errands for her grandmother or played with the other children. She loved helping with small chores, carrying messages, or picking flowers by the creek. Yet beneath the innocence of her daily life, the town was a place where the unexpected could happen, and fate had already begun to weave its dark thread around her bright young life. Rita's warmth and cheer made her beloved by all who knew her. She was the kind of child who noticed small details, who greeted strangers politely, and whose presence left a lingering sense of joy. Little did anyone know, the serenity of Broadford and the happiness of this bright child were about to be shattered in ways the town had never imagined. It was a quiet morning just after Christmas, and Broadford still carried the gentle calm of the holiday celebrations. At 11:30, Rita's grandmother, Mrs. Elizabeth Temple, sent her on a simple errand to buy some fruit from the local shop, just half a mile away. It was a task she had done many times before, but that morning, it would become the last time anyone saw her alive. Rita skipped along the familiar streets, humming softly to herself as she passed Doe's Butchers and the modest homes lining the way. Near Clayton's shop, she met a young girl named Sarah Brace, a friend from school. The two girls walked together, sharing giggles and chatter until they reached the creek bridge.
Here, they said their goodbyes, and each turned toward home. Sarah went one way, Rita the other, her small hands clutching the bag of fruit she had purchased. By 2 p.m., Rita had not returned. A growing worry gripped her grandparents. They stepped out into the streets, asking neighbors if anyone had seen her. The calm rhythm of the town was replaced by unease as the first signs of alarm spread through Broadford. People began searching nearby fields, sheds, and the creek banks, calling her name into the summer air. Then came the first hint of fear. A local woman reported seeing a child matching Rita's description crossing the bridge. A dreadful thought struck. Could she have fallen into Sunday Creek? Volunteers and police dragged the waters, but the creek remained empty, holding only silence. Hours passed, yet there was no trace of the cheerful little girl who had brightened the town with her presence. As the sun began its slow descent, the community's concern turned into quiet dread. The peaceful streets of Broadford, once alive with laughter and holiday joy, were now shadowed with uncertainty. The town held its breath, unaware that this simple errand would mark the beginning of one of its darkest chapters.
As hours turned into the late afternoon, it became painfully clear that Rita was not coming home. Her grandparents, frantic with worry, joined forces with neighbors and townspeople in a desperate search. Every shed, abandoned property, and stretch of countryside was scoured. Voices called out her name, echoing through the quiet streets and along the banks of Sunday Creek, but only silence replied. The unease that had started to settle over Broadford grew heavier with each passing hour. The thought of a child lost in their small town sent shivers through the community. Parents gathered their children close, and friends exchanged anxious whispers. Broadford, a place where nothing bad ever seemed to happen, now teetered on the edge of fear. Then, a new and shocking detail emerged. William Jones, a young man recently employed by the local butcher, had also vanished. He was no relation to Rita, a newcomer to the town, and his sudden disappearance deepened the mystery. The authorities inspected his lodgings and the butcher's premises, searching for any clue that could explain either absence. The connection between the missing child and the missing man cast a long shadow over Broadford. Speculation rippled through the town. Could the two events be linked, or was it merely a cruel coincidence? As night fell, the search continued by lantern light, but neither Rita nor William was to be found. The quiet town had grown tense and uneasy, a dark cloud settling where innocence had once reigned. By the next day, Broadford was gripped by an uneasy tension. The town was not just searching for a lost child, but now facing the mystery of a vanished man. William Jones, the butcher's assistant, had left behind no explanation, only questions. His room, formerly part of a small boarding house, and the butcher shop where he worked were combed over by the constables, but nothing was found. The absence of both Rita and William began to weave a web of suspicion in the minds of the townspeople. Rumors spread quickly. Why had William disappeared at the same time as the little girl? Was there something sinister hidden behind the ordinary routines of Broadford's daily life? Constables James, Wright, and Corey returned to the butcher's premises with renewed determination. Every corner, every room, and every outbuilding was searched thoroughly. Their efforts led them to an old, run-down wooden building that had once housed chickens. Inside, a shocking discovery awaited. Amid the hay, a sack concealed something horrifying: the charred remains of little Rita Jones. The bag of fruit she had been carrying lay nearby, untouched, a cruel reminder of the normalcy of her errand and the sudden tragic violence that had ended her life. The discovery sent a wave of grief and horror through the town. Broadford, once quiet and predictable, now simmered with fear, anger, and disbelief. How could such evil exist in their close-knit community? And as speculation about William Jones intensified, a dark question began to form in everyone's mind. Could the missing man be the one responsible for this unthinkable crime? On the morning of December 28th, Constables Wright, Corey, and James returned to the butcher's outbuildings with a sense of grim determination. Their search led them to an old, run-down wooden building that had once served as a chicken shed. The air was thick with tension, the smell of hay and decay mixing in the early summer heat. As they moved aside the piled hay, a sack came into view, and within it, the unthinkable, the burnt remains of little Rita Jones. The bag of fruit she had carried from the shop lay abandoned nearby, a cruel reminder of the ordinary errand that had ended in horror. Evidence suggested she had been attacked in the yard, perhaps struck by a butcher's cleaver, and there had been an attempt to destroy the body in the large metal boiling down copper used for processing animal remains. The fire had been too slow, too ineffective, and the killer had ultimately dragged her remains into the shed, hiding them beneath the hay. The town was shaken to its core. Broadford, a place of quiet streets and familiar faces, was now the scene of an unthinkable crime. Shock, grief, and disbelief rippled through the community. The cheerful little girl who had run errands, played by the creek, and brought light to everyone she met was gone. And with her death, the shadow of suspicion loomed ever larger over William Jones, the young man who had vanished at the same time.
The discovery of Rita's remains sent shockwaves through Broadford. The streets that once echoed with children's laughter were now heavy with grief and anger. Shops closed, work paused, and a cloud of fear settled over the town. Neighbors whispered of the cruel fate that had befallen the little girl, and suspicion quickly fixed on William Jones, whose sudden disappearance now seemed impossible to ignore. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some feared that if anyone found him before the police did, the man would face the wrath of a town desperate for justice. Mothers clutched their children tightly, and townspeople exchanged worried glances, imagining the unthinkable had been done in their midst. The quiet, familiar life of Broadford was gone, replaced by an anxious and watchful vigilance. Meanwhile, Constables Wright, Corey, and James intensified their investigation. Every testimony, every lead, and every clue was scrutinized. William's abrupt absence, combined with the chilling evidence found in the chicken shed, cast a long and dark shadow over him. The town's collective grief and anger merged into an unspoken demand. The person responsible for this atrocity must be found, and swiftly. Broadford had become a town on edge, its heart heavy with sorrow, its streets simmering with tension, and its people longing for answers that seemed maddeningly out of reach. The simple innocence of a child's life had been destroyed, and the shadow of fear lingered over every corner of the quiet town.
As Broadford struggled to process the horror, the investigation honed in on William Jones. The young man's sudden disappearance at the time of Rita's murder painted a grim picture, and the constable scoured every inch of the butcher shop and his lodgings. Among the sparse clues was a butcher's knife found in William's room, and the missing cleaver from the shop suggested a possible link. Yet the evidence was circumstantial, fragile, and open to interpretation. Witnesses came forward with fragments of what they had seen. Some claimed to have glimpsed a man near the butcher's premises, moving in ways that seemed suspicious. Others insisted they had never seen William at certain times, adding to the confusion. Every statement fueled the tension in the town, creating a web of assumptions and fear. The collective mind of Broadford sought a culprit, and all roads seemed to point toward William Jones. On January 3, 1900, William was finally located in the town of Condemn, about 40 miles from Broadford. He insisted he was innocent, explaining that he had gone to the police station to clear his name after reading about the accusations in the newspaper. But the officers, guided by the urgency of the case and public pressure, placed him under arrest and brought him back to Broadford. The weight of suspicion, grief, and outrage settled heavily upon him. The town watched closely as William was remanded by the coroner, and whispers of judgment swirled through the streets. Every step, every glance, every word of the investigation was under scrutiny. In the minds of the townspeople, the lines between fact and assumption blurred, and the search for justice became a tense, consuming force.
The trial of William Robert Jones began on February 19th, 1900, before Mr. Justice Hodges in Melbourne. The courtroom was tense, heavy with anticipation. The prosecution painted a picture of guilt, presenting witnesses who outlined Rita's last movements and William's sudden disappearance. They argued that the timeline left little room for coincidence, suggesting his absence was proof of his involvement in the tragic crime. The defense, however, highlighted the weaknesses in the case. They stressed that there was no direct evidence linking William to the murder. Much of what the prosecution presented was circumstantial, built on assumptions rather than proof. Witness identification was questioned, as some had been influenced by prior rumors, while others admitted uncertainty about what they had seen. William himself testified, describing his movements on December 26th in detail. He explained that he had delivered meat, rested, and later sought work elsewhere, unaware that suspicion was already following him. The jury examined the evidence carefully. They visited the crime scene, walked the paths Rita had taken, and observed the buildings where witnesses claimed to have seen William. Even then, the line between certainty and doubt remained blurred. The courtroom echoed with conflicting testimonies, from neighbors who were sure of his presence near the butcher shop to those who insisted he could not have been there. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Despite the inconsistencies, William Robert Jones was found guilty of the murder of Rita Jones. He remained steadfast in his innocence, staring ahead as the sentence of death was pronounced. The courtroom fell silent, the weight of tragedy, suspicion, and justice intertwining in a moment that would forever mark the history of Broadford. The trial concluded. William Robert Jones faced the weight of the law. Despite his steadfast claims of innocence, the jury's verdict was clear: guilty of the murder of little Rita Jones. On the gallows, the gravity of the moment pressed down not only on him, but on the entire community that had followed every twist of this tragic story. The execution was carried out with solemnity. William, facing his final moments, spoke calmly, forgiving those around him. "I forgive everyone. That is all I have to say," he whispered, leaving behind a haunting mixture of resolution and mystery. The town of Broadford, still reeling from the horror of the crime and the loss of an innocent child, could only watch as justice, as it was defined by the court, was served. Even after the execution, doubts lingered. Some wondered if the right man had been punished, or if the complexities of circumstantial evidence had led to a tragic miscarriage of justice. The grief of the family, the anger of the townspeople, and the shadow of suspicion all remained, long after the courtroom emptied and the gallows fell silent. The story of Rita Jones, brief and shining, had ended in a way that left scars on Broadford forever. Her innocence lost, her life taken, and a town left questioning justice. The echoes of her fate would linger for generations. Even after the execution, questions lingered over Broadford like a heavy fog. Could William Robert Jones truly have committed such a heinous crime, or had the town's fear and grief clouded judgment? The evidence had been circumstantial, eyewitnesses' memories conflicted, and some claimed they had seen a man who did not match his description. The ambiguity haunted those who had followed the case. For some, justice had been served; for others, doubt remained. The thought that an innocent man might have been hanged for the death of little Rita Jones cast a shadow over the entire town. Families whispered about what could have been done differently, and historians would later debate whether the verdict had been driven more by public outrage than truth. Rita's bright life had been stolen, and the murky circumstances surrounding her murder left a permanent question mark over justice itself. The story of Rita Jones remains one of history's most tragic and unsettling tales. A child's innocence lost, a town consumed by fear, and a man whose guilt is still questioned to this day. Broadford would never forget the sorrow, the suspicion, or the lessons left behind. Thank you for listening to this case on Arcane Testament. If you found this story compelling, please leave your thoughts and reflections in the comments. Remember, history is full of mysteries, and sometimes the truth is as haunting as the unanswered questions it leaves behind.